In San Bernardino, California, about an hour east of Los Angeles, there's a guy most people have never heard of, named Roberto. Roberto is an undocumented immigrant from Guatemala. His wife, Maria, is an undocumented immigrant from Mexico. Maria and Roberto have 4 sons, all born here in the U.S. The oldest, Jose. Then there's Miguel, Rafael, and Daniel. The family survives from an ice cream business Roberto and Maria started a few years ago.
Esta compañía, desde que amanece hasta que anochece, tenemos que sacar para mantener a nuestros hijos.
They've been living all these years not in a house, but in the garage of a house that's rented out to them, with a really small 1-bedroom kind of a thing going on. They pay almost $1,000 a month for this tiny space. And there are other expenses. It surprises some to learn that Roberto and Maria, even though they are undocumented, still pay for business permits and business insurance, and they pay taxes on their income as well. How is it possible they pay taxes even though they're here without legal documentation? The way it works, the U.S. federal income tax collector, the Internal Revenue Service, or IRS, requires non-citizens like Roberto and Maria, who don't have social security numbers that legal citizens have, to file what's called an Individual Taxpayer Identification Number, or ITIN, that proves they pay income tax. Their identities and address are protected under law. The IRS prohibited from sharing it with U.S. immigration officials. So the bottom line is Roberto and Maria pay taxes, among other expenses. And by the end of the month, they barely have enough money for food. And then the coronavirus pandemic struck.
¿Y cuando llega coronavirus? Wow, cuando vino coronavirus, la pandemia en sí para nosotros nos ha afectado mucho porque ha bajado nuestras ventas.
Their family, along with millions of other Californians, was ordered by the state's governor to stay at home. Selling ice cream, not an essential business allowed to keep operating.
Cuando comenzó la pandemia, pues paró todo, ¿verdad? Siguiendo las indicaciones del gobernador de no salir de casa, pues nos estuvimos aquí paralizados como unas 2 semanas aproximadamente sin hacer nada.
COVID-19 initially was particularly hard on undocumented immigrants from Mexico and Central America, losing their jobs in hotels and restaurants that were shut down, and construction jobs and other labor-intensive work temporarily halted. In California, during the early stages of COVID-19, when mass stay-at-home orders went into effect, as many as 400,000 undocumented workers lost their jobs. Human rights groups saying that they received little help from the U.S. government when they needed help the most. For example, Roberto and Maria, because they are undocumented, did not receive U.S. government stimulus payments or COVID relief payments of $1,200 per family and $500 per child, as millions of U.S. citizens did. Maria says it's disappointing they received no COVID-19 assistance, considering she and Roberto, she says, pay taxes like many other undocumented families. California is home to more than 2 million undocumented immigrants. It's estimated they contribute more than $3 billion in state and local taxes each year, and more than $150 million of that is said to be personal income tax.
Nosotros pagamos impuestos desde el año 2005.
Another undocumented immigrant family that has been hit hard during the pandemic is Rosalba's, who came to the U.S. from Mexico years ago, and like many other undocumented immigrants, was laid off from her work at a restaurant here in San Diego, California, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit. She and her husband, himself undocumented, initially struggled to support their 4 children before she could return to work. 3 of her children were born here in the United States. Their youngest is autistic.
Como mis taxes.
Rosalba says she pays taxes and says it would seem only fair that undocumented workers like her should receive financial assistance from the U.S. government, just like U.S. citizens do. U.S. citizens with low incomes receiving what's called an earned income tax credit each year. The average family with children receiving up to $3,000 a year from the U.S. government to help them make ends meet. Rosalba says $3,000 a year would definitely help families like hers.
No nomás a mí, en todos, en qué nos podría ayudar, sería un alivio bastante grande, pero el tener el crédito que más que nada a mis niños por derecho les corresponde, sería algo fantástico porque tendríamos un ahorro que si en algún futuro te quedas sin trabajo o tienes alguna emergencia o no te alcanza para pagar la renta o la comida también, ya es algo que tienes, dices, tengo ahí un ahorro, lo voy a agarrar de ahí. O mis hijos, a mí, por ejemplo, en este caso, mi hija, le pidieron un libro y los libros están carísimos, ok, vamos a agarrar de ahí. Pero ya sería ese sí sería para que veas un ahorro que yo haría. Sí sería un ahorro que yo haría para ellos.
Good news came in California in September 2020 when the state's governor, Gavin Newsom, signed a new law that allows more undocumented immigrants to receive a state earned income tax credit worth hundreds of dollars a year per family. A new law meant to put more money in the pockets of low-income households, regardless of immigration status, particularly during the recession brought on by the coronavirus outbreak. As of September 2020, Latinos account for 60% of reported COVID-19 cases in California and nearly half of reported COVID-19 deaths. Numbers nationwide, too, said to be at 60% or more. Particularly vulnerable are undocumented Latinos who have COVID-19 because the vast majority have no health insurance, making it difficult to access medical treatment with doctors and hospitals. Additionally, many undocumented workers with COVID-19 have told human rights observers they fear leaving their homes and being detained and deported by U.S. immigration agents. So in California, the state earned income tax credit for undocumented families is welcome relief for those without work or trying to recover from COVID-19 at home. However, California is the only state in the country providing this relief. Millions more unemployed undocumented immigrants across the country are not so fortunate to have this. And in terms of national support, there is very little federal aid for undocumented families from the U.S. government. Historically, undocumented immigrants are not eligible to receive federal public benefits for food, health, or financial assistance, such as earned income tax credits, to stretch their earnings. A situation that has not changed under the U.S. administration in the last 4 years. Unai Montes de Oreste of nonprofit charitable organization United Way says the U.S. government needs to help immigrants during the pandemic.
To either help or hinder that. Currently, we are hindering. We are hindering because we're saying, you work, you pay taxes, but you don't have a social security number, so therefore we're not only going to punish you, we're going to punish your children, but we're also going to punish the community where you live because that community cannot have your dollars. They cannot have you go to the supermarket or to the Target or to whatever store and buy what you need to buy. So nobody's going to get that tax revenue. No store is going to make that profit. No new employee is going to be hired as a result of those profits. So now we've hurt the worker, we've hurt their family, and we've hurt ourselves.
Montes de Oeste says adding to the anxiety undocumented immigrants face during the pandemic are federal immigration agents continuing to search for and deport immigrants, often separating parents from their children.
They are destroying people, and they are specifically destroying children. Their worlds completely fall apart. And it is a horrible, horrible injustice that is, absolutely unforgivable.
The story of undocumented immigrants arriving in the U.S. today, says Montes de Oeste, far different than Anglo-European immigrants welcomed with open arms by the United States at Ellis Island during the turn of the 20th century. To be sure, these immigrants entered the United States following the proper procedure at the time required by the government. But decades later, new immigration laws in the U.S. in effect closed the doors to those proper procedures for many Hispanic immigrants.
If you go to Ellis Island, the stories that you hear are people came to this country to make a better life. They didn't come with millions of dollars in their pockets. They came with nothing. It is the most told story in American life, especially by American politicians, about how they had family that came from Germany or Italy or wherever, and they had nothing but holes in their pockets. They didn't even have, a coin to hold. And through their work and through their sweat, they built up and they became American middle-class families. Immigrants continue to have that narrative, and now we've taken that away from them by saying, if you come here with holes in your pockets, we will kick you out. If you come here with holes in your pockets, we will deny you a path forward. You're not allowed to start from nothing anymore in the United States and work your way up. And that is not only heartbreaking for immigrants, but it's heartbreaking for the children of immigrants.
Ellos creen que somos carga del gobierno y nosotros no somos carga. Yo sí le podría decir al gobierno que no somos criminales, que no somos delincuentes, que no somos unas personas que atenidas al sistema. Y sí me gustaría decirle al gobierno que pensara bien las cosas antes de decirlas, porque a veces hace daño psicológicamente a la gente.
Roberto's wife Maria says their sons are not immune from negative comments made by others about undocumented immigrants.
Pues son pequeños, pero sí lo sienten con comentarios que a veces hacen de personas que dicen comentarios malos hacia nosotros.
It's bad. I don't like it.
You guys wouldn't like it either, so it's important to be nice and being respectful, with each other as brothers and sisters, and you just move on, and it's a great way of doing the right thing.
The right thing, says United Way's Unai Montes Iroeste, will be the U.S. government reforming its immigration policy so that undocumented immigrants and their children are protected from poverty during the COVID-19 pandemic.
We believe unequivocally that all children deserve equal protection from poverty. Morally, that's where we should be.